Hi, everyone. Okay, so it's 10:30 here on the East Coast, so we're going to get started. Okay, so thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the November Team Studio TLCC webinar. I'd like to welcome our speaker, John Kingsley, who will be presenting XPages. You know the how-to, now learn the why and what. My name is Courtney Carter. I'm the inbound marketing specialist at Team Studio. I'm joined by Howard Greenberg and Paul Delanebbia of TLCC, and our speaker, John Kingsley of Great X Technology. On the agenda today, I'll be taking a few moments to tell you about Team Studio, who we are, and what we do. I'll then be passing the controls to Howard at TLCC so he can do the same, and then we'll get John to dive right into today's topic. Before we get started, a few things to cover. We have over 300 attendees today. To protect your privacy, the attendee list is not public. You are all muted during this session, so participation will be through the chat window and the Q&A panel. We are doing Q&A at the end of the session, but you're welcome to ask your question at any point in the Q&A panel, and we'll get it to you. We'll get to it once the formal presentation has concluded. This session is being recorded, and the link will be sent to you in a follow-up email later this week. So a little bit about Team Studio. We may have assisted you in the past with application development. We've been delivering innovative developer tools and productivity tools to the Notes and Domino community since 1996, where we specialize in source code control, version management, and source code management. And we moved to the mobile application arena in 2010 with Unplugged. Unplugged gives you the ability to extend your Notes applications out to mobile devices. The unique thing about Unplugged is that it leverages the powerful technology of XPages and provides a native app experience for the user. And these apps have the capability to function when offline. You may have heard that we recently released Unplugged 3.0. This new version runs apps twice as fast, and development of apps is easier than ever. For more information, click on the banner on the Team Studio homepage. We're very proud to have been the recipient of the IBM Collaboration Solutions Award at the Connect conference earlier this year for Unplugged, and this product is available on all the major mobile platforms, BlackBerry, Android, and iOS. In addition to Unplugged as a platform, which allows clients to create custom mobile applications that meet their own specifications, we provide off-the-shelf applications like Team Studio Continuity. This app allows users to import their plans, crisis emergency plans, and call trees, among other things, directly into the mobile device so that this information is available for them if their connectivity becomes compromised. Team Studio Continuity also works on all the major platforms. Our next webinar will be on December 12th. We'll send out more information about this in the coming weeks. On December 17th, we'll be presenting at Social Biz, an online event on enterprise mobile strategy. Visit our website for more information about this. We'll be at IBM Connect this January. Come see us at booth 114. We will have plenty to show you and lots of stuff to give away. You can also visit our website for more information about this. Our promotion this month is if you'd like to receive our continuity app for free when you purchase Unplugged, that is available to you. Click on our banner on the homepage for more information about this, or you can reach out to me directly. And with that, I'd like to pass the presentation on to Howard so he can talk a little bit about TLCC. Howard?
Thank you, Courtney, and good morning, everyone. Myself and Paul Delanebbia are partners here at TLCC, and we'll be your host today for this webinar. So let me see. First, let me switch presenter screens. Or actually, Courtney, I see you did that. And you should be seeing the introduction slide. Okay. assuming that everyone's seeing my slide. Again, myself and Paul Della, we're the founding partners here at TLCC. And just a little bit about TLCC. Hold on, let's see. Slides here. Okay, so before we get into a little bit about TLCC, Courtney mentioned the webinar on December 12th. There's also a very important webinar tomorrow that's sponsored by OpenNTF. And what they're going to cover is going to be announced. It's a special announcement. But I urge everyone on the call today to dial in tomorrow. And our webinar in December will actually go into this special announcement in a little bit more detail than what they're going to do tomorrow. So that is something I highly suggest that you sign up to do. Okay, so that's the webinar. Also, I'd like to point out that at the URL on the screen that you can view all our previous webinars. So we have a couple of years worth of XPages related webinars up at our site. Most of these are up on YouTube that you can watch, and as well, you can also get the slide deck and download the slides. So it's a great resource on various topics, and it's something you definitely might want to look at if you're just in the process of learning XPages, or even if you're kind of just want to find out more about a particular topic. A little bit about TLCC. We've been doing Notes and Domino training since 1997. Primarily, we have self-paced courses, and these courses you take using your Notes client, and then if you're doing a designer course, you'll go use Domino Designer to do lots of demonstrations and activities hands-on. And if you're doing an administrator course, you'll use the Domino Administrator client and also set up a test server or two to try things out. We also have an instructor component in that all our courses have a built-in discussion database that you can ask questions. We at TLCC, Paul and I, also come on site to do private classes, and we can also do online private classes as well. And we also offer mentoring services where we help a lot of our clients make that jump from learning in a course environment or learning, a particular set of skills to applying those skills to their application needs. And so that's been very helpful for a number of our clients. And finally, we also have free demonstration courses that you can sign up at our website for free. We have an Introduction to XPages course for Domino 9 and 8.5. And we also have a demo version of our Application Development 1 course if you are a new Domino developer. Okay, so what I want to spend a few minutes on talking about before we get started in the webinar is a little bit about the IDM Certification Program. So IBM's had a certification program for developers and administrators since back in the R3 days, and both Paul and I were certified back then on R3 and have been on every version since then. And this has always been very popular. I think maybe in the last few years has gotten a little less popular for I'm not sure the reasons. But getting certified has a number of benefits. First of all, you have something you put on the resume. That's always nice to have to prove that you know a certain level of skills. And it kind of also tells your employer that you've attained a certain level of skills. Whether you're even in your current employer, it kind of gives them a good feeling to let them know that you became certified by, let's say, IBM, that you've attained that level of skill. So if you want to get certified, I'm going to primarily talk about the Application Developer program. And actually, Courtney, let's first find out how many people are currently certified right now. Let's do a poll. So we got a poll. Just if you're certified in any version at all, go ahead and say yes or no if you're not. So while we're waiting for the results on that, a little bit about how to get certified, and I'll primarily just talk about the 9.0 level. If you are certified at 8.5, then you can take one update test, and then you'll be certified at the Notes and Domino 9.0 level. If you're not certified, then you have to take two core exams, and they're called 409 and 410. And we'll talk a little bit about what's on those in a second. Courtney, let's go ahead and stop the poll and see where we're at. Okay, so while we're waiting for the results, okay, so there we have the results, and I'm assuming everyone can see it. In case you can't, it looks like we have about a little over half the folks were certified in some level of Notes and Domino. So that's pretty good. Let's go ahead and do the other poll, Courtney, and see what level people are certified at, and I'll keep talking while we're doing that. So just indicate what the highest level of certification you are at for the poll. And in the meantime, I'll talk about the Advanced Application Developer Certification. So once you are certified at the first level of IBM Certified Application Developer for 9.0, you can become the Advanced Developer by taking one of the 4 exams that I have up on the screen. So the only one that's currently available that's developer related is a test on mobile advanced topics. That's called the 411 test. Or you can get certified by taking any of the 9.0 admin exams. So that would be the path to get the advanced level certification. Okay, so let's see, before I move on, let's see where we're at on the poll. Courtney, if you want to stop that and share the results. Okay, so we kind of have, I'm not sure if the results are visible to everyone, but kind of a little bit across the board on the versions. Only 5 of you are certified on 9 right now. A lot of people on 8.5, and then the rest of you are anywhere from 5 to 8 for your highest level of certification. And that brings up a good, another topic, and suppose you're certified on, let's say, Domino 8. How can you get certified on 9? Well, if you're certified on 8, there is an update exam to get certified on 8.5. Then you can take the update test that I have up on the slide, the 408 exam, to move your certification to 9. So that is the highest level, 8.0 is the highest level that you can do the upgrade path. Otherwise, you have to start over again with the core exams that I have up on the screen. So just let me, real quick, show everyone how to get more information on these exams. And Paul's going to talk about the current exams in a second. But IBM has a pretty good website that explains their various certifications, and there is a section for Notes in Domino. And if I click on the application developer one, it will talk about the kind of things they're going to test you on. And then they have the requirements at the bottom. So they have the path that I just went over with the 408 update exam or the 2 core exams. And if you click on any of these exams, you'll get to information about that exam that shows the overview, the objectives in a fair amount of detail. And so you definitely want to know everything on these objectives. Okay, so if you're studying for one of these exams, look at the objectives, print them out, and know everything about every objective. That's the best way I can tell you to prepare for the test. If you click on test preparation, IBM will have some of their suggested resources to prepare for these. You'll happen to notice TLCC is one of those. And then you also can do a sample assessment test. This is something that IBM does. It costs $30 US, and this is a practice exam that you could take before you actually take the real exam. Because the real exams are anywhere from $150 to $200. They have various specials. You can keep an eye out for that. But you definitely want to go into the exam knowing you got a pretty good shot at passing. Okay, let's Paul, maybe you can talk a little bit about the what's on the 2 core exams, because Paul was a participant in the volunteers, number of developers, both IBM employees and non-IBM employees, helped develop these various test questions, and Paul was one of those.
Okay, thank you, Howard. I think your chart does it well. You need to know quite a lot. But those are the 5 main areas. So you need to know about Domino Designer, and more from a Domino Designer in Eclipse perspective. So how to customize the Eclipse environment, how to work with Eclipse perspectives, views, editors, working sets, how to perform an Eclipse search, for example. Your Notes client development, so that's your traditional Notes client development, questions or objectives on architecture, things like document IDs, response documents, local replicas, templates, working with those. Your design elements like your forms, your subforms, your views, your agents, and so on. And many security questions. So you certainly want to pay attention to both Domino security and database security. The rest of the exam is related to XPages, and that amounts to about 2/3 of the exam objectives. So working with your core XPages library and controls, things like your core edit box controls, your input controls, your core container controls. And then for mobile development, there's only one objective, but you don't want to be fooled by this. The one objective, working with the mobile controls, does represent about 5% of the exam question. So you certainly want to pay attention to that area when you're preparing for the exam. And the final category, the extension library controls. So things like the controls that were introduced in Release 9 in the extension library, things like your application layout control, your navigator controls, data view, form table controls, dynamic content controls, and things like your dialog controls. So that's kind of a summary, and certainly there's a lot to prepare, but our course is certainly our one effective tool for covering those objectives. Howard?
Thanks, Paul. And as Paul mentioned, TLCC has courses that can help you. If you're just taking the update exam, we have one test. We have an equivalent exam for administrators too that covers everything that's new from 8.5 to 9.0. So this isn't just a how to help pass the exam course. This really does cover everything that's new from 8.5 to 9.0. Like the JavaScript, server-side JavaScript debugger, and a whole bunch of other things. If you're not certified yet, we have 5 fairly complete courses that cover everything on the 2 exams. And we have a number of packages that bundle some of these courses together. And we actually have a sale going on through the end of the month on some of these courses and packages to help you pass the exam. And there's a link on the slide, which I'll also put into the chat. Okay, so right now we have a drawing, and we have IBM has donated 2 certification exam vouchers. So these will pay for a certification exam for 2 lucky winners. Paul, do you have the names of the winners?
In fact, I do. So the first winner is Kelly Barrett.
All right, Kelly. And our next winner, we do have
I don't know if our attendees can do any applause, but
they can raise their hand.
The next winner is Steve Cochran.
All right, Steve. So Kelly and Steve, we'll send you an email afterwards with information on how you can access that exam. Okay, so we'll get started with John. First of all, Q&A. Your microphones will be muted throughout the webinar, but we do have Q&A at the end. And the way we'll handle the Q&A is that there's a Q&A pane in the WebEx interface. So you can go ahead and ask your questions as they come up. And at the end of the session, we'll go through your questions, and John will answer them. Okay, so that brings us up to John. John is a senior software engineer with 20 years of experience developing Notes apps for both large and small companies. One of John's specialties is the application lifecycle management, all the way from the requirements definition through to the deployment and training of users. So that's one of the key things John's going to talk about today is how do we really decide what applications we move to XPages? What is worthy of the investment? So John, we're going to move controls over to you. Oops, let's see. Find the right panel here. And John should be getting the initial dialogue. We are seeing your screen.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from. My name is John Kingsley, as Howard mentioned, and like Howard and Paul, I first got certified on R3. And so this morning we're going to talk about XPages, the how-to, and now learn the why and what. So there's been a lot of sessions talking about, at the various conferences on XPages and how to do XPage development. And, a lot of people talk about going mobile or web enabling their applications. But really, and XPages is really the best way to do that. But before that, you really need to know what applications you're going to mobilize or web enable and why. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. This is a session that John Coolidge, who's at Team Studio, and I gave at MW Lug this past fall, summer. And, Howard was talking about OpenNTF. Some other resources I want to mention here at the beginning. OpenNTF is a great resource. PlanetLotus.org is another great website. It has a bunch of, it aggregates a lot of the blogs related to the topic. And user groups, MW Lug, IM Lug, those are both great resources that you should take advantage of, to further your skill sets. So as Howard mentioned, I've been doing Notes development for 20 years. I worked at Digital Equipment and at Team Studio. And at Team Studio, one of the things that I worked on was proof of concepts for mobilizing applications. So that's kind of my background on that. So what we're going to talk about today is reasons for web enabling or mobilizing your applications. Then we're going to talk about what applications to mobilize or web enable, and then talk about some considerations for those things. As I mentioned, I'm not going to tell you how to develop with XPages. There's a lot of other resources about that, other sessions. There's the resources that Howard mentioned that they've got the courseware as well. XPages is really the way to go to web enable or mobilize your applications. So that is something that you're going to want to get involved with. So why would we want to mobilize, web enable our existing applications? And I'm talking about web enabling or mobilizing. Web enabling is really something that a lot of people have considered. And people that have done that have probably already gone that way. It's essentially the same situation as when you mobilize. But the reasons for web enabling, you want to get rid of the Notes client. People are just tired of the Notes client. I want to reduce my license costs. There's always an upgrade. The smart upgrade doesn't work. Various support issues that they want to get rid of the Notes client. So that's one reason. And the people that have gone down that path have looked at that. Another reason is you want to expand your application to other users. One account I dealt with, National Association of Realtors, they cannot tell all the realtors you need to install a Notes client to access our applications. So that's an example where you want your applications made available to people in a web browser is really a good way to go. The other reason that people may look at web enabling their applications is, you know, they might want to get off of Notes. They say Notes is all these Domino servers and everything. We're going to go to Exchange, or we're going to go to Outlook or something like that. And I tell you that it is a lot easier to web enable a few applications than it is to migrate your entire infrastructure over to another platform. Web enabling is really a good way. Using XPages to expose your documents to web browsers. Mobilizing, if you look at the platforms, they don't support you know, Lotus script, so you need to mobilize your applications through XPages. And let's talk a little bit about why to mobilize. This is a chart, and you can see the on the bottom the source of this. You can see that personal computers are pretty much leveling out. Smartphones are taking off. We're here around 2013, and you can see the number of smartphones, and that's just going to continue to grow. So you have more people adopting smartphones. I heard somebody say the other day that there are more phones on the planet than there are people. And if you think about it, I've got a dead one in my drawer downstairs, plus the one I carry around. I'm sure that there's a lot of those things. So mobile devices, mobile phones are just going to continue to grow. Same thing with internet users over the next few years, and most of these will be mobile devices, either tablets or phones. And one of the really great things about a mobile device is it knows where you are. So there's a lot of great applications that you can do, that you can implement if you know where the person is. So if they're, you know, in a service industry and they're making calls to client sites, you know where they are. They can fill out the information. You could pull up location details, things like that. So again, why people want to mobilize? Well, when smartphones came along, all of a sudden people now were able to get their corporate email on their phone. So now I can read my email whenever I want. So that was, you know, we still do a lot of stuff via email. With your telephone now, you've got a lot more availability, a lot more access. You don't have to worry about trying to find a Wi-Fi hotspot. You almost always have telephone access. And, you know, with the phones now, you get a much more, I'm going to say modern look and feel, because you've got a much smaller screen to deal with, so your methods of navigation have to be a little bit different than the classic Notes view with 1,000 documents in it. My 3-year-old grandson is flipping through the photos on my wife's phone. It's just that common of a interface that even 3-year-olds can work on a phone there. So now your CIO comes in and says, we're going mobile. And you go, oh my God, what does that mean? Do I have to mobilize all my applications? Well, no. And that's really what we're going to talk about in more detail here. You don't need to have a mobile version of every application in your enterprise. Certainly some of the applications that you've got that run agents that take hours to run and run on the weekend, you don't need to mobilize that. They're going to continue to stay in the back office and run their existing agents and generate all those reports. So if you need to just take a breath, and we're going to take a look at your applications to see what kind of applications make sense, or what parts of your application need to make sense to mobilize. And web enabling is the same thing, but I'm really going to focus on mobile because that's really, people have web enabled have probably already done that one. So when you go to mobilize an application, you don't need to mobilize every form, every view, every design element. So it's not that big a deal. On the other hand, if you were going to migrate to Outlook, yeah, you got a bigger problem there because you are going to have to rewrite everything. Yeah, this kind of goes without saying. I don't want to put that on a phone. I had another example I was going to show you. I was traveling last week, and I had to check in with my airline, 24 hours before to get your boarding pass thing. And I checked in on Friday, and they have since updated the website, but it was really, really horrible. I was on my phone, and the page was micro font. I couldn't even read it, and it was clearly designed for a tablet because it wasn't resizable. I couldn't expand it to make it bigger. I went back to take a screenshot of that yesterday, and fortunately they've updated that site, which is what you can do with a web application. You can update a site, and it's now available to everybody immediately. So just some of the things. So what we're going to talk about is the process for what to enable. And it starts off with assessing.
Hey, John, can I just interrupt you really, really quickly?
Sure.
I've gotten a few comments from attendees that your pane is flickering between your Notes client and Designer. So maybe if you pause your PowerPoint presentation for just a second and minimize those windows. I'm not sure what's causing it, but it's flickering for everyone.
Is that better?
Oh, it's slowed down for a second.
It's something right above your slide, John.
Sorry for the interruption. I just didn't want anyone to be that distracted.
Yep. How am I doing now?
Still there.
I'm not sure what's causing it. So we're just going to move on and keep going, but I just wanted to address that to see if we could try to fix it for everyone, because I got a few comments, but sorry for the interruption. You guys can keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I apologize for that. I also got a new system over the weekend. It's Windows 8, and I'm not yet all that familiar with it, so I don't know if it has to do with that. So really what we're going to talk about is assessing your current environment, evaluating your application complexity, and then trying to identify the first application that you want to mobilize. I say identify your first win because we really want your first application to be successful to get support within your environment there. So we're going to talk about assessing your current environment. And this is generally a good thing to do for any number of situations if you're going to be upgrading your applications. If your applications aren't being used, you don't need to worry about upgrading. If you're trying to consolidate servers, why move an application if nobody's using it? So, try and identify the applications that aren't being used. Now, you kind of know intuitively which applications are being used. You've got your big three that you're spending all of your time on developing those applications, so you kind of know, but there's also, turns out there's a lot of other applications in your environment that might not always be being used. So one of the things that you can use is the database catalog. This is a great resource. It's got a lot of information about your environment. I do want to show you a little bit. With your database catalog, it is your catalog. so that you can go ahead and, there's a lot of useful information in there. It's not always that available. Here, one of the things that I've done with my catalog is I've taken the view for access control level and added a couple counters. And so one of the things that you can see is here I've got 32 databases where the default access is manager. You know, probably not a good idea, but it's just something that you want to look at. Some other things that you can look at, look at template name, template inheritance. You want who inherits from, number of documents in a database. If I've got a lot of databases with no documents in them, maybe those are candidates to get rid of. I put in a couple of filters here to look at just databases and just templates. So you can see, looking at it, you would be surprised looking at your environment how many databases have a small number of documents in them, and those are things that you can get rid of. The other things that you want to look at is there's some databases that have test in the title or file name or even dates. You've got the 09 version of a database or the 08, any of those kind of things. So those are really clues to some databases that might not being used. So those are things that you don't need to worry about. I don't need to mobilize those because no one's using those. These probably shouldn't even be on my my production environment. Template inheritance is another one that you may have a lot of databases, but they all inherit from the same design. So you really don't have that many unique designs that you need to worry about. So looking at template inheritance will also help you identify the size of your problem, how big that those applications are that you might need to migrate. Again, looking at the applications, looking at them by title, you want to kind of look at what are the business critical applications. I know that a number of years ago, one of the most popular applications at Lotus was their soapbox application, where people can get up on their soapbox and pontificate about whatever they wanted to talk about. It's not really a business critical application, but it was very popular. Things like this one, we had a client with a database called Recipes, and it really was their production recipes. It wasn't a cookbook sharing site. Some other things you want to do is you want to look at the business owner if possible, if you can identify that. Over time, that has probably changed. People don't keep that information up to date. And that can help you with the business owner to tell you whether that application is still being used or not, or whether they've moved to something else. And then find out what the applications are being used for. If they they're not being used, or they're used once a year for their annual audit or for their Connect planning or things like that. You can use a spreadsheet to do that, or you can create a notes application to keep track of that. But identifying all those things, and that's really a good one. You can add that into your catalog. Who's the business owner of this application? And now you can start to identify, keep track of your applications that way. Once you've identified the applications that are being used, what you want to do is take a look at the complexity of the application. And the reason is, when you start to mobilize an application, you kind of want to pick an application that's going to be successful, so you don't really want one that has a lot of complexity to it. It's just going to be a lot harder to mobilize for your first application, having to deal with that kind of complexity. So some of the things to look at is workflow. If you've got a lot of agents and a lot of query save and a lot of events that happen on the backside, you can still do some of that with when you mobilize an application. We did a lot of those things with Unplugged, when the database would replicate back to the server. Instead of being on document save, it was now on when new documents arrive. So you can continue to use a lot of that existing workflow in your application. Looking at complexity workflow is one measure. Another measure is just the amount of number of forms and views that you have. So if you've got a lot of views to navigate between, that's going to be a complex application, but you don't necessarily need to mobilize all of those. So try and pick an application that's not that complex. And also another aspect of that is the amount of data that needs to go through that. So a calendaring application that has reservations for every meeting room. There's a lot of information in there when all you really want to do is see what's happening next week or see what rooms are available to book. So those are just some other things that you need to take into consideration when trying to mobilize an application. So once you've looked at the complexity, that's going to affect the amount of effort it's going to take to web enable or mobilize the application. So what you want to do is pick an application that's not very complex. It's got some easy workflow and a limited amount of data. You know, the more data, the more forms and views, the more complicated it's going to be, the longer it's going to take, and the harder it's going to be to implement. And then, of course, the very large ones, applications, you want to tackle those later on in your cycle. So this is kind of a chart that we put together. You know, of course, you have your quadrants there with your effort to mobilize and the business criticality. So what you want to do is you want to have an application that makes sense to mobilize, that will have an impact on the business. So you want to have some sort of business criticality to it, but you also don't want to pick the most complex application you've got. This will just make your first effort that much more successful if it's something that people use. I mean, you don't want to mobilize an application that's real easy, but that nobody's going to use and want to take advantage of. So the first win, again, you want to pick something that's business critical, that will affect the business, but it's not that complicated. Some of the other things that you want to take into consideration when mobilizing an application. If you're targeting PCs or laptops, typically that's going to be a web browser application, web enabling it. With tablets and smartphones, there's a couple of different options that you have with that. You can, of course, do a web browser for those things, but you also can do a native application. And Unplugged is a native application for those devices. It's a great way to write an XPage application and have a native application on your phone and not have to worry about whether it's Android or iOS or whatever. If you were to do a native application for a smartphone yourself, you would have to consider what type of devices your users are going to be using, whether it's an iOS or an Android. Again, a type of application is something that you want to look at. One of the biggest wins is a simple approval process. People get an email, say you've got a new employee requisition or a new hire and need to approve it. Not a lot goes into that one. You can just, and that's a great one to do. I can, with my phone, I can approve an application, a request without having to find a Wi-Fi hotspot and just do it in a couple of minutes, no matter where I'm working. Form fill application is another example where you can mobilize that. If you're out on a job site and need to fill in a form on results of your job, that's a good example of something that you might want to do. Reference example as well, if you want to pull up information on what the customer has bought from you before, maybe some contact information because I know where you are. I can give you a list of the contacts for that client that you're visiting. So those are a couple of kinds of applications that make sense to do. Additional considerations, I mentioned earlier the check-in application. You've got different screen sizes. You're between your laptops and your smartphones and even your browsers. And depending on your tablets and depending on your orientation, which way you switch it. So this is a case where your style sheets are going to come in handy and help you to style your application to fit the target devices that you're working on. One app for everything, possibly. You're probably not going to want to do that. And again, this is where your navigation and your style sheets are going to come in handy and help you to format the page to fit the device. Some other things to consider is connectivity. In some circumstances, your users are not going to have access to the Wi-Fi or maybe even the phone network. I was in the Caribbean and telephone charges were international, and it was just a lot easier to turn off my phone, put it in airplane mode, than to try to deal with international calling for a week. So then again, this is a case where offline storage might be a consideration. When you talk about offline storage, then you need to worry about the device getting lost or stolen. So security is going to be an issue, maybe in local encryption on your devices. And even in places where you wouldn't expect it, connectivity can be an issue. In Manhattan, you have a lot of buildings causing interference there. And again, looking at your data plan, how much data am I going to be pumping through my device? One of the nice things about doing a mobile application, it's my phone, my tablet. I don't need to have everybody's information on my phone. I only need information on my phone or access to that I care about, my clients, my contacts. So this is just another aspect of that to help you reduce the amount of information that you need to send down to your phones or make available. Loss of mobile devices. When you start to talk about mobile devices, you're probably going to want to be talking about a mobile device management solution, MDM. We all use Traveler. A lot of people use Traveler to get your corporate email. Your MDM solution is the solution that's going to help you manage those devices if they get lost or stolen, to be able to wipe those devices. Again, you have to consider whether the employee is bringing their own device or whether it's a corporate supplied device. But you're going to want to have them under mobile device management so that you can protect your corporate data. So to wrap up, when you start on an effort to mobilize your applications, you want to find an application that's going to be successful. It's going to be used. It's going to have an impact on the business. And once you have your first application, then you can start to expand and roll out a bunch of other applications and look at more complicated applications. What you don't want to do is take your CRM and try to put it on a phone. There's just way too much information on there. What you need to do is look at what parts of that make sense to put on a phone. So just contacts, maybe recent activity at that account that you can pull down. And with the approval process, you don't really want to have a lot of drawings, and attachments that somebody needs to review. I really don't want to review a big document on my phone. I'd much rather wait until I had Wi-Fi connectivity and had access to a full screen for something like that. So again, something else to consider with your application. So more information, here's some links. These will be available in the slide set that we will make available to you. Future mobilizing enterprise app, 10 tips, and rules for better interfaces. So we had one client we were working with that they wanted a web-enabled version of an application, and we took the opportunity of making it look like a real web application. They came back and said, it doesn't look like a Notes app. And we said that was the whole point. So there's a lot of things that you can do to take advantage of the web and the web interfaces. And just because your display will show 65 million colors, you don't want to use all of them. So here's a resource on better interfaces. So that's really all I had. I'm going to throw it back to Howard to go through any of the questions.
Okay, yes. Well, you can transfer it over to me, John. Okay, so thanks, John. That was informative, and it definitely a lot of stuff to consider before we go down that path of converting our apps to web-enable them via XPages or to do mobile. So we have going to have Q&A now. So the way to ask questions is the Q&A pane in your WebEx interface. So you should have a Q&A at the top ribbon. If you move your mouse to the top of your screen, you'll have a drop-down or a slide-down menu, and there should be a Q&A option there. If you don't see it, then there's a down arrow to the right of that, which Q&A should be one of the options. So please go ahead and ask your questions, and John will respond to those. While we're waiting for questions, just some upcoming events. Again, the OpenNTF webinar tomorrow. I urge everyone to attend and see what they have to announce. I think you'll find it exciting if you're working with XPages or thinking about working with XPages. There's also a DC lug for those folks who are joining us in the DC area. That's Washington, DC. There's a meeting on November 21st, so you'll get these links when you get the slides. Of course, Connect is open. They've already announced some of the speakers for Connect. I think some of the early bird discounts end fairly quickly, so if you're thinking of going, definitely you might jump on those early bird discounts. And again, we have some specials on some of the courses to prepare you for certification that end November 30th, and Team Studio has a webinar on December 17th. So let's see, Paul, do we have any questions lined up?
No, we do not. So if
actually, John asked a question to me in the chat window. He asked, is there a mobile version of Lotus Workflow?
I'm not sure of that one. John, do you? I'm not sure I understand the question, actually.
Well, I think Workflow was the Lotus product. I'm not sure how currently supported that is.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that either.
I'm going to say no on that one myself.
Yeah, we'll have to plead the fifth on that one.
Yeah, I would look to the extension library, a lot of the mobile controls that are available in that. I don't know about Workflow. One of the issues that you're going to have with any kind of workflow is that it's not going to support Lotus script. So any of the workflow that you have using Lotus script is not going to work on on a mobile device or even web browsers. So you're going to need to do some server-side JavaScript or even client-side. But again, when you start to look at mobilizing your applications, the data is eventually going to get back to your server, and so you can pick up any of the workflow when the data gets back to your servers there with scheduled agents or whatnot. You know, that might continue to work with your.
Looks like we have an additional clarification on John's question. So a number of applications they've built with Lotus Workflow, they work. There's a problem with the Java action bar. That does not work on a smartphone. So the question is are these workflow applications suitable for enabling as mobile applications?
Probably not as your first application. I wouldn't want to address those. But as you get more experienced with XPages, that's something that you might consider. You probably could implement your own page for that, your own control for that. The nice thing about XPages is you can, doing your own custom controls and reusing those over and over again. So I wouldn't tackle that first, but it would be something I would consider doing a custom control for.
And if the action bar was just strictly more of a user interface thing, you could probably replace it with some of the Dojo controls that are in the extension library to build a nice interface. They do have a toolbar option in the extension library, which might help and might work on mobile as well. Or on mobile, you might want to use, in the case of the mobile controls, there is a way to create a toolbar section in your mobile page. Speaking of mobile, we have a question, John, from Steve. And he says, many experts prefer not to use the mobile controls. What would you suggest?
That's a good point. I like working with XPages because it's fairly simple to drag and drop and to create a simple form. You will probably find as you go forward, and it's kind of, I compare it to the API. You can do a lot of things with regular notes and Lotus script and just your classic notes development. The real power developers would get into the API, and now you can do even more stuff. The same sort of thing with web developing and mobilizing your applications. The custom controls and the extension library, they're prepackaged. They're already done for you, but what that means is that they're not necessarily the most efficient way of doing something. So that as you get more experience and become more familiar with those things, you might say, I can do that myself. So that's been my experience and what you'll probably find happening to you as well. I would not start out by writing JavaScript and HTML and just doing all that stuff. I would start with the controls. When you see what the source code is generated for that stuff, now you can start to make modifications to the source code. I see a lot of people that doing their development, they go right to the source pane and they don't even worry about the controls. Well, you might as well just be using Eclipse to do your development with its editors and not worry about Download Designer. It really depends on your level of experience, and so getting started with something new, using XPages is really the best way to go. As you get more experience, you may want to branch out.
Okay, we have a question from Leon. John, what did you mean by native apps for tablets?
Oh, yes. A native app, so if you're writing for an iOS, that runs C#, I think, something like that. That if you write in an application for an iOS device, a tablet or an iPhone, you're going to have to write it using the language that is supported by that device. If you go to Android, you can do it in Java. You write a Java application. So that's really a native application for your mobile devices, is one that's written in the language for that device. So that's what I mean by a native application. There's somebody has taken the Notes session database for Connect and created an iOS version of that. It's a native application. It only works on iOS devices, and that's the issue we run into, is that you're not going to find a language that works on multiple devices like that. That's where an approach like Unplug comes in. It kind of gives you a level of abstraction that hides the device that you're working with, so that you don't have to rewrite it multiple times. So that's really what I mean by a native application for the device, and what goes along with that. So if you were to go out to some contractors and say, we want you to write an application for us, you might go native on it, but now you, because they've got that expertise, but now you've got this ongoing support of that application, which you might not have the skills to take care of.
Okay, we have another question from Michelle. What should you consider when deciding which JavaScript framework to use for XPages development? Dojo, jQuery, or other?
Yeah, that's another good topic. And you know, there were a lot of sessions that were talking about that. And I would point you towards those other resources. A lot of people have their own opinions on those things, and it really can depend on the type of application that you're going to work with and your experience level with those applications. And there is no one answer to what's the best one. Unfortunately, it's really going to be what is easiest for you to work with, and what type of application you need, what type of controls you need in your application to work with. So,
yeah, I'll add to that I mean, Dojo is built into XPages, so that kind of comes automatically. And then jQuery has been pretty popular by a lot of folks doing some mobile work. I think, Paul, is it Marky Roden who's written a lot of blogs on jQuery?
Yep, Marky is certainly one of the jQuery experts out there.
Yeah, his website is, it's like Domino, but with an X in front of it. And so definitely, if you're thinking of jQuery or just want to learn more about it, check out Marky's website. All right, you have another question, Paul?
Yeah, question from John. What are the best practices for navigation to your suite of mobile applications? In a corporate environment, we might have 50 applications. How do the smartphone users find them? Is there a special menu, shortcuts, search for keywords? What are your recommendations there, John?
well, it's interesting when you look at the iPhone that they went with a chiclet interface, which we notes the users have seen since the very beginning of the workspace. So it's interesting that that's the metaphor that they chose for their navigating their applications. So whatever application you do and install on the, you're going to mobilize, you have a couple of options. One of them is you can have one icon, and that's the one that navigates to any of the other sub-applications that you want to work with. You could have one icon for every application, and you run into the situation we had with Notes where you've got icons gone wild all over your workspace. So it is, you do need to be aware of it. One of the things that I like to take into consideration with my applications is, again, the target device. So you want to make your application look and feel like the other applications that the users are used to working with on that device. So, as far as the sliders or the how to quit the application, you want to kind of pay attention to the device that you're working with, whether it's swiping to the side or up and down and those kinds of things. So that's really, as far as navigation, the other types of applications that the user uses, and make it consistent.
Okay, we have a question from Roman. And Roman asks, would you recommend to do everything in XPages, or do you still have a notes part? An example would be for administration or looking at logs or setup screens.
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of what I was talking about. You don't need to mobilize everything. So all the admin functions, they stay in your Notes client. Your admins are still going to be doing their work on the Notes client. And likewise, for some of the workflow stuff, you don't need to mobilize that workflow. That once that form gets submitted onto your server, then you can do the rest of your work. So that really simplifies your task, because I don't have to mobilize all of my screens. A lot of that administration just stays on the Notes client, so you don't have to worry about it. You can leave a lot of the workflow there. And even some of the more complicated stuff, you can just send a notification out and say you've got a document, and leave it to them to eventually get to their Notes client, where they can look at the detail and look at that huge PDF or whatever those attachments are. So absolutely, you don't need to mobilize everything.
And I guess a lot of that depends on, if the Notes client is going to still be around in your organization, take advantage of it. Don't worry about, converting, like you said, John, everything. You still have the Notes client, you still got, the app might already be existing and it works, then why worry about it? Just worry about expanding the reach of that application to the web or to mobile. Okay, we got a question. Paul, you want to take that one?
I was locked out for a moment, so I'm not sure where we're at, if you can continue.
There was a question from John, which he just asked, how do you get feedback about mobile applications? I assume user feedback.
That's a good one. A term I've used is gamification. What that means is that you build into your application some feedback mechanisms so that you can see what's actually being used. So what forms and views are people using, and maybe build in some things in the application to do that. You want to encourage users to take advantage of the shortcuts that you build into your applications, and you can. That's the one way of doing it, is the users don't know that they're providing you feedback, because your application is telling you what they're using and what they're doing. But otherwise, you do want to provide mechanisms for them to give you feedback on your application. And it is surprising, the more people you show your application to, the more opinions you're going to get, and the more feedback and the use cases that you never considered that people are going to give you some good input on. So you do want to provide a mechanism for doing that. Whether it's part of the application, you don't want to pop up and say, would you participate in a survey? But if you can provide a mechanism for doing that. And it's not necessarily part of the application, but provide them a good way of doing that. And email works really well, too.
Okay, I think we are out of questions. So I'd like to thank John for presenting today. It was very informative. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending. So we will post the recording of today's webinar in a few days. We'll send an email out to everyone with the URL as well as the slides. And so I hope everyone has a great rest of their day or evening, and we'll catch you at our next webinar. Courtney, did you have any final words?
Thank you guys for attending, and just look for details for our December webinar in the coming weeks.